So I've mentioned that we have a lot of regulations for our horses, and sometimes too many. Some are silly, and some are overkill, and some are good. But over the years, when these real estate interests and animal rights extremists fail at getting us banned, they push these laws through that sometimes hurt our business and overregulate it. And their goal is to drive us out of business. So I'm going to talk about a few of the other ones and weird ones. So a few times we've actually got suspended for a solar eclipse or a partial eclipse. To us, it's kind of, there were horses out in pastures and fields all over the place that were not affected, but the health department just kind of goes above and beyond on that kind of thing. Another thing that has not actually happened before, because we usually have very good air quality, but unfortunately with climate change and whatever's going on out there, there have been a lot of these like wildfires and things like that in California and Canada, and it actually blows all the way over here to New York City. Last year it was so crazy, the sky turned yellow, orange. So what the health department started doing is that if the AQI, that's the quality of the air, is 150 or more, which is the red zone, it goes from green to yellow to orange to red. If it hits 150 or more, we get suspended and we go back inside. And we've had maybe 3 or 4 of them over a couple of years. There may be one today or tomorrow. Right now it's still yellow, we're fine. Most of the time it's yellow or green. Basically orange is like if you're really high risk you can go in. Red is like, no, it's not safe, don't breathe the air. But the thing that's funny to me is like I was like coughing, I didn't know what was going on the very first time it happened, and I'm like, why is it like smells smoky and it's harder to breathe? And we got this suspension text, and so I went back to the stable, and then I was thinking, you know what, I didn't have to stay out there and breathe that and cough, not because of me and my health, but because of my horse. The city cares more about our horses than us, because he had construction workers, everybody else working through it, but our horses come first. So I don't have to work when it's too hot or too cold or the air is not great because of the regulations for my horse, which is pretty cool. Yes, we lose business to it sometimes, but I don't want to work all the time. I don't want to work when the conditions aren't great, and that's just kind of the sacrifice you make to work with animals. Some other things the city did, let's see. So this wasn't exactly a law, it was more like a rule change within the Department of Transportation. But to hurt our business, what we had was horse carriage stands directly outside the park, running along the park wall on Central Park South, which is the equivalent of 59th Street, and all around Grand Army Plaza. This has been designated horse carriage stands since before the park was here, over 160 years. These were the taxi stands that were horse-drawn and are still horse-drawn. And that's where we would, pick up customers, get passerby, oh, you know what, I want to take a carriage ride. And we framed the park really nice. It was like, we were basically parked like cars right next to the street. We didn't have a single issue. Not once was a horse, related, any kind of incident or accident related to them being there, with cars going by and all of that. So safety was not an issue for that. Never once had anything relating to that spot there. Again, we didn't really have enough hitching posts. There were a couple of poles and fire hydrants we were able to tie our horses to sometimes. They weren't ideal. The lamp posts were great. Lamp posts have this little notch in them because they're replicas from back in the day of when they were actually used as tie posts. So they're like the perfect shape and spot to tie up your horse. And we'd asked the city for a hitching post for like a bazillion years. At one point, animal rights activists were actually opposed to it because they wanted us to get into an accident so they would have a reason to get rid of us. Luckily, that did not happen out there. So we had these great parking spots where we were highly visible, where our horses were comfortable, where they would just relax. And we could, get our passengers, and the route we had was all designed based on where our starting points were from there. And when they had passed laws about how long the horses could work and what time they started work and all of that, this is all based on those spots because it takes a certain amount of time coming and going from the stable and the park. So they wanted to figure out something that would be fair to get us enough business, but also not too much for the horses. So we had this perfect little area. And the city changed their mind because of this pressure from groups like New York Class. And they were like, you know what? We're going to hide you guys away so that no one can find you. We're going to shove you in the park. So the passerbys that want a tour of the park can't get you right outside the park, right before you enter, about 10 feet away from the entrance. We're going to shove you inside where they can't see you, so it basically kills the night shift. No one's going to know we're here. And we're right behind those pedicab guys that steal a lot of business from us, running that bait and switch scam. People have to go through a wall of pedicabs to get to us now. So we do unfortunately lose a lot of business to that. We have these like Facebook screenshots. I'll try to see if I have it handy and throw it in here, where members of New York class at the time made a lot of comments that this was specifically designed to hurt our business. It was not for the horses, and they were hoping to drive us out of business by doing this move. So what they did was they said you can only pick up carriage rides where you have a stand with a sign that says, you know, horse carriage parking, basically. Oh, actually, I should have one right here. I can show you. Let's see. Yeah, there's one. I'm going to go over here so you can see this sign. Hang on. Where are we here? Yep, there you can see it. I don't know if it's backwards or it's going to reverse it, but you see it says horse-drawn cabs only. So those are our parking signs that show us where we can pick up and drop off customers. And when you say that we can only do it where those signs are, and then you have 68 horse carriages, 68 medallions that the city gives us, and you only give us enough space for like 30 or 40 horses carriages, where do you think the other guys are going to go? How are you going to decide who's allowed to work and who's not allowed to work? All our separate privately owned business, we're all equal. So what ends up happening is we have to find spots that do not have a stand that we can rest our horses. The horses are required to get at least 15 minutes rest per ride by law. Not per ride, per 2 hours of work. Usually it's much longer. But hypothetically, if you did 2 hours of work, and you're not allowed to stop your horse anywhere where there's no sign, and all the slow business day, you know, all the carriages are lined up and there's nowhere for you, you have to technically break a law by stopping your horse somewhere that there is no sign. So this feeds way that you can get a ticket for that. Now, the city realized how ridiculous that is, and we do not get tickets for it most of the time, but the whole idea was to hurt us, drive us out of business with tickets like that. That make no sense. And it's like your alternative is to break the other law of, you know, overworking your horse, just nonstop going round and round in circles until there's somewhere to park, which of course no one is going to do. And then there's the thing, like, what if your customer's like, hey, I want to go to the bathroom, or like, I feel a little sick, I just want to stop the ride and get out here. I'm going to get a ticket unless I hold you hostage because there's no sign, I can't pull over. So we found a lot of flaws in this, and we brought it up to the city, and they're like, meh. So we are stuck with all these conflicting laws and rules for us, and we just do what makes most sense and what's safest and best for our horses. When we were moved into the park, we were moved to spots right off of Central Park South in the park, off of 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, and 7th Avenue. Big issue with 7th Avenue is that it's on a hill. So horses, when they're resting on flat ground out here, they do not have the weight of the carriage on them, but they wanted us to face down the hill with the carriage rolling up into them. We said, absolutely not. We will park on the hill because you're forcing us to, but we're going to put a block behind our carriage, and we're going to face our horses uphill so that they do not have that weight on them. But how poor is that planning? Now, the other thing is, when a horse doesn't rest on flat ground, if they have this genetic disease called PSSM, I've spoken about it in another video. It's common in draft horses. If the horse doesn't show signs for it, the way our regular routine is, with the way we feed the horses and rest them and everything, that's all you would have to do for a horse that does have this. Police horses, like I was saying, they don't test for it, even though they use a lot of draft horses. And their horses could occasionally have it too. And you don't really know until a symptom comes out. So a symptomless horse is not going to show signs of that necessarily, unless something exacerbates that condition to come out. So we had a horse here, it's a little loud, named Aisha, and she had this, subclinical, undiagnosed condition no one knew about, and she was doing fine. I think she was here around a year or so. And when she got moved to this hill, this condition came out. She had an episode. There was videos of it everywhere where they were trying to act like this wasn't a medical emergency and this was some type of abuse going on. And that was spread and slandered against the industry everywhere. And she got trailered to the stable and treated by a vet pretty quickly. And she ultimately had to be put down. Now, there's an equine vet, and I won't say who because I don't know if they want to be named, but to this day will tell you that that is fully on NYCLAS. They totally believe that they caused the death of that horse, because if she was not moved with that condition from the flat ground to the hill where she usually parks, about 10 feet from where she used to park, it probably wouldn't have happened. I'll try to put a link between these videos so you can see a little bit more in depth about that incident. It was in 2020, a while ago. We got moved into the park in 2019, so the end of the year. And then we weren't here for a while because of the pandemic. We had to send all the horses on vacation for like a year and a half or so anyway. Because even if we could have brought them back when it was legal to operate, it was just like there wasn't enough business to like have the horses here till we really got going again. So you have laws like that are passed by people that don't know about horses, that end up hurting horses, that equine veterinarians say, do not do this. When they did a test on the horses' cortisol levels, the stress hormone, they found that these horses were relaxed and happy outside in the street there where they used to stand in their old stands. And why would you think that they were stressed and you had to move them? Every sign of evidence showed there was no reason to move these horses. So terrible decisions are sometimes made. The other thing is the new spots they move us to are less shaded most of the time. They're actually hotter, which means that you could get more heat suspensions and have to, couldn't work your horses as much, which isn't healthy for them, because anytime that the weather's not too hot, you should absolutely be able to work your horses. And along with that, we get into the other rule change that happened. We got laws passed for the horses, for the temperatures they can work in. In 1989, a law went into effect that said the horses could not work when it was above 89 degrees. That temperature is determined when the mounted horse unit comes out to the horse carriage stand, and they take that temperature with a specific thermometer at horse head height, and then they send that information to the equine vet at the health department, and they're like, oh yeah, this temperature is too hot. Okay, it's 90 degrees or above. They send us a text on our phone. Back in the day, it was written or verbally done. And we will get 30 minutes to complete rides in progress. And then all the time we need to, rest our horse, get modes water or whatever, head back to the stable. That's what we've been doing. We haven't had a single heat-related issue in our horses. No collapsing from overwork, overheated, none of that. Since these laws went into place, probably way before they were in place too, because people just generally did the best thing for the horse back then as well. In the 80s, 1980s. We're in 2025 right now. How long ago that was. So all these years, never had an issue. And we actually, at the time, had the lowest temperature restrictions for horse carriages in the entire country. So we were like overkill, good on those regulations. No issues due to them, no issues following them. And they wanted to drive us out of business. They said, we got to get these guys losing more days. So we're going to put humidity into effect. Now, there was a study done, I think it's FEI, am I saying the right abbreviation there, for the horses, where they took humidity into account. And there was a mathematical way they tried to figure out, okay, when it's this humid plus this hot, it's not okay to work your horse, it's probably too much strain on them. And that was for horses galloping over jumps and doing really hard work, like really heavy, not low impact work like we do at a walk or occasional trot, And what they ended up finding was they were like, all right, when it's about this humid and this hot, there's like a chart for it. You shouldn't work the horse, you should take more caution. And that started at 90 degrees. So since we already don't work the horse at 90 degrees, it did not really make sense that you need to now add humidity into this. Now, the law that they passed had changed a couple of times to try to sneak it through. What did pass was that when it hits 80 degrees, which is just a random made up number out of nowhere, when it hits 80 and the humidity level is added to 80 degrees or higher, 82, 83, 84, whatever, then if the sum of those two numbers is 150 or more, we get suspended. Not based on any science, doesn't mean anything. We've obviously worked the horses, up to 86 degrees, 87 degrees when it was humid and they had no issues for all these years, like I said, since the 80s. So we started getting more heat suspensions because the humidity was taken into account, and that started hurting our horses because you don't want them in too long. All our rules and regulations were based on the way that just things that worked for our horses at the time, based on where they were parked and how many hours they were doing and all of this stuff. it made absolutely no sense that our horses would now get cooped up in their stalls. They get a certain amount of vacation time in pastures, and the work that they do in the day-to-day getting out here, that supplements that need for daily turnout. That's just the way it works in our industry. You might want to keep your horse different, and that is totally fine, but that works for us. So when they made these new laws, it just messed up everything. And it was possible our horses could get cooped up in the stall and they could colic, and that could be serious. Now, what we do is walk our horses outside to get them, moving and everything when we have to, but that shouldn't be necessary. You should be able to drive your horse when it's not actually too hot. Now, the people that came up with this study that they said they based this law off of when they made this law change, they said, we highly recommend against this for carriage horses. They were like, this is not a study that was designed to be applied to this type of industry. That was their quote. But that was ignored. Equine vets said, this is a bad idea, don't do this. But that was ignored. The horse people do not get listened to when animal rights interests come into play, and it ends up hurting the horses. And when you're not making as much money for your horse, you can't pay for their hay, for their stall muckings, for their care, for everything else. And we get by. We do what we have to do. We dip into our savings accounts and do what we have to do so that we can still survive. But it should not be that way. You should be doing things that help horses, not hurt horses, because you don't understand them and because of how it makes you feel, not how the horse feels. So these are just some of the things that we've gone through over the years. The bill was really sneaky too, because it still accounts for the fact that we don't work the horses above 89 degrees, that law that was already in effect. But council members didn't know that the day before they were going to vote on this bill, because I went out to City Council, to City Hall, and I was giving council members this flyer. Here's the information on this bill. Please vote against it. The few that I got to speak to did flip. They didn't vote for this bill because they found out that it wasn't passing that the horses can't work at 90 degrees above, that they already had that in effect. They didn't know that. They thought that's what they were voting for. And they had snuck into this bill and just, kind of tweaked it a bit so that these people didn't even realize what they were voting on. And it ended up passing because of this. And they thought, well, maybe if we just give these extremists one little win, they'll leave you guys alone. No, they didn't leave us alone. They're still trying to hurt us. And a win like that is not worth giving into. You don't give into extremists who are doing something wrong for horses because you think, oh, well, then they'll stop. No. So they now will sometimes quote in the newspapers that just a couple of years ago we got the regulation for our heat laws and all that. No, we had that in place. They just made it stricter and stupid. That was what we went with on our flyers. Temperature plus humidity equals stupidity. I actually came up with that. So that was on our posters and everything. But it passed, and that's what we deal with. And now, with all these kind of crazy regulations, crazy laws, some good, some bad, some contradictory of each other. And this is what we work with in the city.